Somewhere in the desert outside Dubai, a patch of sand the size of a small city is being erased, not by nature, by choice. Right now, over 100,000 workers are building something that has never existed before. An airport so large, it will handle 260 million passengers every single year. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire population of Brazil, passing through one building every 12 months. Dubai is spending $35 billion on this project, and the question isn't can they build it? They already are. The real question is, why? Dubai already has one of the busiest airports on the planet. Dubai International Airport, DXB, handles over 90 million passengers a year. It's been the world's busiest international airport for nearly a decade. Most cities would call that a success story. Dubai called it a problem, because by 2030, that number won't be enough. Air travel demand across the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa is growing faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. New routes, new airlines, new passengers who have never flown before. And Dubai sits almost perfectly in the center of all of it. Within an 8-hour flight from Dubai, you can reach 2/3 of the entire world's population. That's not a coincidence. That's geography. And Dubai's leadership understood exactly what that meant. So in 2014, they made a decision. Don't expand the old airport. Build a new one entirely, not just bigger, the biggest. The site they chose was Al Maktoum International Airport, already partially built, sitting quietly in the desert near Jebel Ali. It had been open in a limited capacity since 2010, but the original plans were nothing compared to what was now on the table. Engineers and urban planners were handed a brief that most professionals had never seen before. Design an airport for 260 million passengers annually, with 5 runways, with enough cargo capacity to move 12 million tons of freight every year. The scope of it was difficult to process, even for the men drawing the blueprints. But here's what those blueprints didn't show. The real reason Dubai needed this airport had nothing to do with passengers at all. Here's something most people don't know about Dubai. Oil made it rich, but oil is running out. Dubai's own reserves are expected to be largely depleted within the next few decades. The leadership in Dubai has known this for years, and they've been quietly building a replacement economy, one that doesn't depend on what's underground. It depends on what's overhead. Aviation, not just flying people from point A to point B, but controlling the flow of global trade. Right now, roughly 30% of the world's air cargo passes through or near UAE airspace. Electronics from China, pharmaceuticals from India, fresh produce from East Africa, medical equipment from Europe, all of it moving through a narrow corridor of sky above the desert. And Al Maktoum is being designed to dominate that corridor entirely. The cargo facilities alone at the new airport will be unlike anything built before. A dedicated freight city with cold storage, customs processing, logistics hubs, and direct road connections to Jebel Ali Port, one of the largest shipping ports in the world. Air and sea, combined, in one location. The engineers working on the cargo infrastructure described it not as an airport extension, but as a new kind of trade organ for the global economy. A place where goods don't just pass through. They get sorted, stored, repackaged, and redistributed across 3 continents. When that vision landed on the desks of rival cities, London, Singapore, Frankfurt, some transport economists grew quietly concerned. Because if Dubai pulls this off, other major hubs don't just lose passengers, they lose relevance. But building the world's largest airport comes with a problem no one is talking about publicly. Building in the desert sounds simple. It isn't. The land around Al Maktoum is not just sand. It's unstable, shifting, and in certain areas, geologically unpredictable. Before a single runway could be laid, engineers had to spend years studying what was underneath. Ground surveys, soil compression tests, deep bore samples pulled from dozens of meters below the surface. What they found in certain zones gave the geotechnical teams pause. Layers of soft sediment, areas with inconsistent load-bearing capacity, the kind of ground that, under the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 777 landing at speed, could behave in ways you don't want. So before construction could begin in earnest, the Earth itself had to be engineered. Hundreds of thousands of tons of material were brought in to stabilize the ground. Deep soil improvement techniques, Methods usually reserved for skyscraper foundations were applied across an area larger than some towns, and that was just the ground. Then came the heat. Concrete poured in summer temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius begins to cure too fast. It cracks. It weakens. It fails quietly, sometimes years later. Every major pour at Al Maktoum had to be scheduled, monitored, and in many cases cooled actively during the process. Workers on site described shifts where the ground itself was too hot to touch with bare hands. Over 100,000 men working in rotation. Night shifts, cooling stations, medical teams on standby. The human cost of building in this environment is rarely discussed. But there was something else, something the construction teams hadn't fully anticipated. A logistical problem so large it threatened to delay the entire project by years. And it had nothing to do with engineering. The problem was water. Not a lack of it, though the desert has almost none. The problem was what building this airport would demand: concrete production, steel cooling, dust suppression across a construction zone the size of a mid-sized city. The daily water requirement for the Al Maktoum site at peak construction was staggering. Thousands of tanker trips, desalination plants running at capacity, supply chains stretched thin, and in a region where water is already one of the most carefully managed resources on Earth, that created tension at levels most people never heard about. But water wasn't the only thing being consumed. The steel alone required for the terminal structures was sourced from multiple countries simultaneously. Supply chains running from mills in Europe, Asia, and the Gulf region, all converging on one patch of desert in southern Dubai. Project coordinators described it as one of the most complex procurement operations in modern construction history. A single delay in one country, a strike, a port backlog, a production issue, could idle thousands of workers on the other side of the world. And delays did happen. In 2020, the entire project was forced to slow, not because of engineering, not because of funding, because of a global pandemic that no one had planned for. For months, the site ran at reduced capacity. Supply chains fractured. Worker rotations were disrupted. Some specialist contractors couldn't enter the country at all. Project managers had to rebuild timelines from scratch. But here's the part that surprised even the senior engineers on site. When construction resumed at full pace, it moved faster than before. And what they discovered during that pause changed the final design of the airport in a way no one expected. During the pandemic slowdown, something unexpected happened. Air travel collapsed globally, but cargo didn't. In fact, cargo demand surged. Medical supplies, vaccines, electronics, food shipments rerouted as sea freight backed up at ports worldwide. And Dubai's existing airport, running at reduced passenger capacity, quietly became one of the most critical freight nodes on the planet. The men running Dubai's Aviation Authority watched this in real time, and they made a decision. The new airport wouldn't just be bigger, it would be smarter. The pause gave engineers and planners time they hadn't budgeted for. They went back into the designs and rebuilt entire sections of the cargo infrastructure. Wider freight corridors, more automated handling systems, cold chain facilities nearly doubled in capacity. The passenger terminals were also reconsidered. The original design was efficient. The revised design was something closer to a small city, retail districts, transit connections, hotels built directly into the terminal structure. A place where a traveler could arrive, spend 2 days, and leave without ever stepping outside. When the full vision was finally presented, one senior transport economist described it simply: Dubai isn't building an airport. It's building a city that happens to have runways. And that distinction matters, because when Al Maktoum International reaches full capacity, projected sometime in the 2040s, it won't just be the largest airport ever built. It will be a permanent shift in how global trade and travel are organized. Other hubs will adapt. Some won't survive the competition. And somewhere in the desert south of Dubai, the cranes are still moving. The story isn't finished. It's just getting started. If you want to keep watching stories like this, real projects, real consequences, real scale, subscribing takes 1 second, and it means you won't miss what comes next.